up, scholars? Welcome back to another video. My name is Haley, otherwise known as the Fictional Scholar, and today we are going to be looking at my favorite TV show of all time, Psych. And we are going to be focusing and analyzing 3 episodes in particular, and that is the Yin Yang trilogy that starts as the finale of season 3 and continues as the finale of season 4 and season 5. If you don't know, Psych is a show that originated on USA in July of 2006 and aired for 8 seasons, ending in March of 2014. It is a fantastic show. Absolutely hilarious, and you can find it on so many different streaming platforms, the main ones being Peacock, of course, and then Amazon Prime also has it. Or if you want to be a real one, you can purchase the entire box set, all 8 seasons. I probably watched the show as many times as Sean Spencer has probably watched The Breakfast Club, so I don't know if I should be proud of that or ashamed of it. But we're here. So Psych as a TV show is really one of a kind, and a lot of the humor in that show has actually shaped a lot of my humor today, and a lot of the catchphrases that come from that show, like "come on son" or "suck it," or I've heard it both ways, semantics, all those, I use them in my vocabulary so often. It's because this show has quite literally shaped my sense of humor, a lot of it being dark and crude humor, but it's fine. It's fun. We all enjoy it here. Relax. I don't think there's ever been another show that has quite shaped my humor like Psych has. And there hasn't been a show, like a TV series, that I have just gone back and rewatched and still had just as much fun as the first time I watched it, like I do with Psych. It is just that good of a show. I know all the fellow psychos who are out there, the fans of the show, are so loyal to it. It has an incredible fan base to it, and I'm sure they can all agree with me saying that they can rewatch Psych at any given moment as much as they want because it's just that good. And today we are going to be getting into the Yin Yang trilogy, but for those who maybe don't know about Psych, Psych is a detective show that follows the antics of the fake psychic detective Sean Spencer and his best friend and sleuth Burton Guster, or as we better know him as Gus. Gus. Oh God. This show has a fantastic set of characters, and just the plot for each episode is well thought out and just so well executed. The humor is on point. The points where it gets serious is fantastic. The relationships between the characters are amazing. It's so fantastically done. The success for their show is largely due to the great comedy, the story progression, the storytelling, and just the plots for each episode as it progresses. However, over the course of 8 seasons, there have been some more serious episodes, and none quite have such the great storytelling as the Yin Yang trilogy does. And the Yin Yang trilogy really takes the show and transforms what was already great into something greater. In my opinion, this trilogy, along with how it is played into different aspects of the rest of the season and the rest of the show, really puts Psych above other TV series that I've seen. The genius of the Yin Yang trilogy comes from putting the characters into situations where their normal antics, their normal facades, and their characters kind of have to be broken down, and they have to be a little bit different and approach these scenarios a little bit differently, especially for our main character, Sean. He is normally a very goofy person, and he has to kind of change how he approaches these cases because of how serious it gets. And the normal antics and facade of these characters really get broken down, and their character, the truth of their characters really gets brought out, and it's raw and exposed, and you see so much character growth in these characters in such a short amount of time. And we are introduced to a fantastic side character that is, 1, perfectly casted, and 2, so well written and makes these episodes so good. So before I get too off topic and just heaping praises on it, let's go ahead and get right into the video. Of course, this is your official spoiler warning. If you have not seen Psych, at least up to season 3, season 4, season 5, because those are the main seasons I will be talking about in this video. So if you haven't seen it, save this video and come back after you've watched Psych. Preferably all 8 seasons, but at least up through season 5, because that's where the Yin Yang trilogy takes place. So other than that, let's go to the video.
I know, you know that I'm not telling the truth. I know, you know they just don't have any proof. It's the deception, learn how to bend your worst inhibitions, then the psych you out in the end.
So at the end of season 3, we are introduced to the notorious sailor. At the end of season 3, we are introduced to the notorious serial killer, Yang. I was trying to put serial and killer together and I got Searle. The serial killer is an established one, and we get that with confirmation from Chief Vic whenever McNabb brings in an envelope with the Yin Yang symbol on it, sets it in front of Chief Vic, and she looks at it and says, "Oh God, no." You know, that one establishes that our killer is a little bit different than what we have seen previously in the first 3 seasons. The second indicator that this is not a normal episode is that it starts off differently than most of the episodes in Psych does. It usually starts off with a flashback from Sean's childhood that usually in some form or fashion comes into play later throughout the episode. But this, instead of starting with a flashback, they start off at a diner and they're eating, and Sean ends up calling Abigail. Wow! He ends up calling Abigail Lecter and asks her on a date. So those two, the scene in the beginning with Sean and Gus, it's a little different than what we're used to in the setup of an episode. And then with the following scene of McNabb delivering that envelope to Chief Vic, automatically shows us that this is not going to be a normal episode, and we're about to get into something really big. And the words Chief Vic speaks really establishes that this is someone the police and Chief Vic has dealt with before, but someone that our protagonist, Sean, hasn't. And it's neat to see this type of setup for a serial killer, because there are so many different shows and movies that have a completely different setup, like in Murdoch Mysteries. When James Gillies is introduced, he is already there. He's present in the story. And he's seen interacting with Detective Murdoch. He's asking questions, aiding the investigation, until at the end of the episode it's finally revealed that he is the one who is killing. If you want to look at the James Gillies analysis I've done, it's going to be in, it's going to be in that corner. So you look at that. Another example of a setup where the serial killer is known is, of course, Hannibal Lecter. We see Clarice going to visit Hannibal Lecter to, of course, catch another killer, but she seeks out his advice in a very twisted way, and before he escapes, he is a known cannibal. So that is already established, and he's present and he's there. Another example is that of Halloween, since it's around that time of year, with Michael Myers. He is a very present villain. We see him, we see through his mask, his eyes, and we know that he is the killer. We know he's around here, he's lurking about, things of that nature. And it's a different type of tension that those types of shows and movies build. But with Psych, in this one, our killer is not seen, and she is not known. So this setup is completely different in the sense that Yang is not once shown. They are not present there. So instead of the physical presence of Yang, there is this kind of mental presence through the notes and the psychological game of calling Sean out and calling and taking a victim, leaving notes, leaving these games behind, the timer, everything like that. That is the presence of Yang that we get in this episode instead of a physical presence. And to me, that actually adds a little bit more suspense, because we don't know who we're dealing with. Because as Chief Vic kind of solidified is that there's no physical data on Yang. They don't know who he is, what he looks like, anything like that. There's not a single shred of physical evidence tying him down to any person. They are literally just on a chase, playing the game. So combined with this history of the killer and this crazy psychological game where they take a victim and they challenge somebody and play this game to see who wins, Yang or the challenger. Yang intentionally calls Sean out, involving the psychic in something that he should probably not be a part of. While at first it seems like just, another case that Sean's being called to, the seriousness of this antagonist is established by Henry, who learns of this, comes to the station in almost a panic, and goes up to Sean, pulls him aside, and says, "I forbid you to be a part of this." And of course, Sean's just like, "You can't forbid me to do anything." But Henry further establishes the seriousness of this killer when he says he knows about you, he knows about everyone around you, insinuating that Mr. Yang has done his research not just about Sean, but about the people around him and the people he cares about, which to anybody is a terrifying situation to be placed in. So Sean, despite Henry's warning, he goes through with it. Mr. Yang has called Sean out for a specific reason. There's this type of personal angle to why he's chosen Sean. Sean, of course, is very put out by being called out by a serial killer, as one would be, especially one of this magnitude. At first, he does his best to keep his composure, resorting to jokes and the silly antics as he normally does. But that method quickly falls when he realizes the seriousness of the situation, and the longer he spends on the case, the more you could tell it just slowly starts to wear at him, and it's starting to get to him a little bit. He's trying to keep himself grounded. He's trying to keep himself composed to face this killer. And it really shows the magnitude of who he's up against, because even for Sean, who has put many murderers behind bars at this point, even he can tell the difference between this case and the rest of the cases that he's done over the years. And Sean becomes a much more serious character in these episodes, which gives us a side of him that we don't normally see. With the challenges Yang presents to him, Sean is forced to drop the silly acts that he often does, just kind of keep himself up, and really buckle down and get serious. And he does this in a few different ways. One, he snaps at the detectives, especially Juliet. He really snaps at her. Two, he's taking risks that could result in someone else's death. When they're on the pier and he has the phone in hand and he's refusing to answer the phone like Yang has instructed because he knows Yang is watching, he takes that risk knowing that the girl could possibly die by doing this, but he takes the risk anyways, doing something drastic and a little out of character, because Sean before, while he's silly and while he's not always serious, he's never intentionally put someone else's life in danger. And three, he changes the way he approaches the case. Instead of being out in front of everybody, the center of attention, Sean decides to take a step back and really just say, no, I'm not going to play the game like he wants me to play. I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to go under the radar, away from the police, away from the killer, away from everyone, and do what I can do. However, Sean slightly underestimates how far Yang is willing to go to play the game. And the tone of this episode, while already more serious than most of the other episodes we've seen up to this point, it completely flips into much a darker and almost a horror-like state whenever Sean gets to the hotel and realizes that Yang has taken his mom. It is one of the first times we really see Sean break down and not really be able to smile or laugh or joke or anything like that. And he just falls back into a chair, unable to stand, and he just says, he's got her. Gus, he's got my mom. And it's actually so sad to see Sean like that. But it's always, in any sort of TV or television, the character who's normally happy and cheerful, giddy, goofy, joking around, whenever that person gets serious or breaks down, it always hits that much harder. And that's exactly what they did. They showed Sean being incredibly serious and just broken down for just that moment of knowing that his mom could possibly die. And it completely changed the tone of this episode. The stakes got raised so high for Sean after that to solve this case, but he does just that. In that tense ending, he is able to locate his mom, who is strapped in the car with a bomb, and he's also able to find Mr. Yang, who ends up being a female. Which, by the way, that reveal was shocking in and of itself. Having a female serial killer at the forefront of that episode was incredible, because nobody expected it to be a female. That reveal is so brilliant, and because it subverts all expectations from not only the audience but from the characters in the show, because nobody was expecting it to be her. But at the end, when they're having their conversation, Yang willingly surrenders, giving Sean the device, the little bomb device, so he could save his mom. She doesn't kill her. This setup, as you know, Yang is arrested and everything, this setup of Yang in the back of your mind, knowing that she may not be completely gone, because there's this thought when she says, because we'll be working together again. There's that thought that this isn't quite over yet, and that looms in the back of everyone's mind. But because we go almost the entire next season without seeing anything or hearing anything from Yang, we kind of forget about it, which leads us to setting up Yin. So just as the law of opposites imply in the duality of Yin and Yang, we are introduced to a much more chaotic yet sophisticated killer in the introduction of Yin at the end of season 4 in the episode Mr. Yin Presents. Yang, while crazy, had rules, patterns, the timer, the game, a very direct set of rules that she followed. Yin is the complete opposite. There are no rules. There's no set rule. Anytime they figure it out, boom, it switches up, it changes. They can't pin down a set pattern for this person. Yin plays by no rules but his own. The only set clues that they can garner from Yin are the ones that he leaves them with the Hitchcock films, which, brilliant but terrifying, because Psych. And Mr. Yin Presents starts off with a flashback again, with Sean going to the theater, not to see The Little Mermaid, but to see Psycho. And then it goes straight into the future, oh gosh, not the future, to the present, when Sean is going to the theater again to see Psycho with Gus. And then afterwards they meet up with Mary again, and he invites them out for pie. But Mary gives them the warning that Yang wasn't working alone, that she had a partner, Yin. Of course, Gus and Sean are not so keen to believe him. They're kind of creeped out by Mary, and they kind of dismiss him at first, until they get the call the next morning when a body has appeared. And it happens to be the waitress who had served them their pie was strangled in a very Hitchcock fashion, left on the ground in the form of the yin yang symbol. I just can't talk. With the yin yang symbol being how her body is kind of contorted with the rocks around her, Sean is able to piece it together and realize that Mary wasn't lying, that there was indeed a yin out there. And so once again they have to hunt a killer they know nothing about. And while Lasseter and Jules kind of do their investigation, Sean, Gus, and Mary decide to go straight to Yang to get the confirmation. And Yang does just that with a little bit of persuasion, and she confirms it with I never said I didn't have a dance partner. Solidifying that yes, there is a yin out here, but he's that much more dangerous. He is acting on his own, and they have absolutely no idea about anything this killer does. And Yang even warns him, she's like, you think I'm sick? You haven't seen anything yet. Which, she was right. With this killer comes a whole slew of misdirects and misunderstandings set up by Mr. Yin himself. Not only does he trick Sean into believing Mary might be the killer through like ankle weights, through misunderstandings, through coincidences, so much more, he's also, or we're made to believe he's the type of killer who wants to be chased. But there's so much more extravagance to the case than that. And again, with this episode, we are seeing Sean in a completely different light. He's serious. He's not as extra as he always is. And he's trying to solve this as quick as he can because he does not want to deal with this killer. Even with the misdirect of Mary, who ends up being Yin's next victim in a very tragic turn of events that is far too much like Psycho for my own liking, the episode manages to get so much darker when the cast is called out as different Hitchcock characters to play roles in a movie, and then Juliet is taken. When this first aired, I'm sure I wasn't the only one who was genuinely terrified for Juliet whenever we realized she was taken, because at the time we didn't know how many seasons the show was going to get, and we knew this was the season finale. And the fact that this killer had already killed off Mary meant that it could quite be possible that he could kill off someone else. And with Juliet being taken, I was genuinely afraid. I was like, they're going to kill her off. It's like, they're really about to kill Jules. I was terrified for her. We've seen those characters in danger before. Of course, they're always in danger. That's part of their job. You know, we've seen some dire situations before, but nothing quite like this. And that's what made it so much different, because it's like, oh my goodness, this is happening. This serial killer has taken Juliet. And then that scene when she's kidnapped, and then the consequential scene following it when there's just that dead silence in the police department and everybody's just so quiet, waiting to hear something. It's just chilling. It's so well done. And then, to top it off, Abigail is also taken. And it's the most personal attack directed at Sean. Two of the most important women in his life have been snatched away, and now he's having to make a choice. And the epic and terrifying scene, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, this scene of Sean and Henry chasing and trying to save Abigail, and Lasseter and Gus trying to save Juliet, is such a high tension scene, but it's so well done, so well executed. And luckily, and they are able to save both women, but there are the consequences that Yin gets away and ultimately leaves the entire group with some PTSD and some trauma, especially Juliet, that they're gonna have to deal with. And it's that looming fact that this killer is still at large and that he is gonna return at some point. And it stays in the back of the characters' minds, but also as the viewer, it stays in the back of your mind of saying this isn't over yet, that there is still more to come. So with the setup of the actual killers, there's also the setup that goes into the storytelling of these side characters, these kind of one-off characters that Psych, in my opinion, has always consistently done well. They have always been really good at making very memorable side characters that are kind of one-off or only in like 2 or 3 episodes with minimal screen time, but they make them so memorable. The ones that come to my mind just automatically are like Despero, Ewan, Jules' brother, Frank O'Hara, Jules' father. Those are always fun characters to see. And of course, Mary quite contrary. It's something Psych always does well. They create these very memorable side characters that are perfectly casted. Like, the casting for these characters is superb. I cannot imagine anyone other than Jimmy Simpson playing Mary Lightly. Like, he did it so well. And the way they built up Mary's character, it's so unique and eccentric, from the idea that, he's basically unforgettable the moment you meet him, from one, the fact that his name is Mary, and the family history behind that. My father's name was Mary, his father before him name was Mary, and his father before him was named Craig. Great family history. Thank you for letting me know, Mary. From that, from his obsession with Yang to this little flimsy handshake thing that he does, like, these little eccentric things about his character make him so memorable, and it sticks in people's minds, like, the moment they see it and the moment they recognize him. Like, you can't forget Mary. It makes him stand out in the episodes he's in a very good way. The real brilliance of this character comes from the fact that he both creeps Sean out, but he also amuses Sean at the same time. Like, some of the antics we see Mary doing, like running to chase the train with his ankle weights on, and Sean's like, no, you really need to see this, Things like that, it amuses Sean, and he knows that, yes, despite, like, Mary being a little odd and that he's kind of creepy at times with some of the things he does, Sean knows, like, okay, we gotta work with this guy and, catch the killer. But on that other side, the creepier side, is that, Mary really does creep Sean out in certain parts. Like that whole scene of, like, Mary finding them in the rain and then them at the diner. It's so funny because you can see how awkward Sean and Gus are, and kind of how creeped out they are by Mary, because they're like, okay, you really shouldn't have come back to Santa Barbara, but you're here, okay, yay, I guess. This dynamic built around Mary makes it that much easier for Yin to kind of deceive Sean to believe Mary is the killer. It made it that much easier to make Mary his scapegoat, because if Mary had completely been just like a comic relief character or a serious profiler with just like the odd antic of like the handshake or whatever, it would have been much harder for Sean to believe that he could be Yin or he could be the killer. But because of the way Mary is set up, is that he has kind of like, he's helpful, he's a genius, and he's really keen on this Yang thing, but on the other side he's kind of creepy and not too sure about him. It makes it a little easier to frame him as a potential murderer. And of course, Yin goes the extra mile with like the ankle weights, the coincidences, the notes, all that stuff. He really goes the extra mile to really pin it on Mary to distract Sean. But it also makes it that much worse when we learn that Mary is just the scapegoat for Yin. Once Sean realizes his mistake, when they're in that room, you can just see the change in the tone for his character yet again. His desperation to save Mary from Yin's trap is very present. He's shouting, like he's trying to get Mary out of there. They're looking around frantically, trying to find a way to get to Mary. Unfortunately, they got there too late. Yin stabbed Mary in a very parallel to Psycho. Mary goes down the stairs, he's stabbed, and Sean gets to Mary afterwards, and this character who's normally goofy and everything is just as serious as he can, and he's talking to Mary, who is now, as we know, is very misunderstood, and he was just trying to catch Yin off guard. He was trying to catch the killer his own way. And you can see the more Sean talks to him, the more regret and pain just comes over his face as he's talking, because he's realized the gravity of his mistake. And the immense guilt that Sean feels at that moment is just almost unbearable. And I truly believe it was the death of Mary that made Sean and everybody else really take Yin seriously. Before, they thought Yin might have been a little bit closer to Yang. They were still playing this game. He was this far off person, this far off killer that they didn't really see or hear from before this. And now, even when they believed Mary was the killer, it wasn't as tense as it was after Mary had been killed. Because after he died, the tone for the rest of the episode drastically got darker. And that's when Yin truly became a horrible and terrifying threat, because he hit close to home. He made Sean doubt himself and feel guilt for his actions, and all that regret was piling up on him. And then not only did he call Sean out But everyone else Sean was close to, Lassie, Gus, Jules, his dad, and just the domino effect that Mary has on this show with Sean specifically is drastic. Mary played a crucial part in helping catch Yang, and then his death as a martyr flipped the script and flipped the narrative to a much darker one for several reasons when they approached Yang. One, this show before Mr. Yin Presents has not been presented with the death of a character actively working with the protagonist. There had been some tense episodes, of course, like An Evening with Mr. Yang, you know, the first one, or Sean Takes a Shot in the Dark, or even Tuesday the 17th, which I still really have, that one really creeped me out when I was younger. I don't know what it was about it. I don't creep me out. That's besides the point. Anyways, you know, we've had dire episodes before, but nothing as pressing or as dire as this one. Mr. Yin Presents in the Yin Yang trilogy is probably the darkest one of the three. I can say that pretty confidently, you know, because people around them were starting to die. And for viewers, it really felt that this killer might take one of our beloved characters from us because they just killed off, like he just killed Mary. He could kill someone else. Two, he got Sean not only to regret his actions, but he really impacts Sean on a very personal level. Sean's miscalculation somewhat led to Mary's death, and Sean feels a heavy responsibility for that. And Sean changes from this point in the episode. He's desperate to find this killer. Sean's scared that Yin could possibly take someone else away as easily as Yin took Mary away. But this time he's scared that it could be someone who's much closer to him. Someone like his father or Gus or someone like that. He even tries to get his father not to get involved in the case again. And he's nervous about Gus being on the case. He knows he couldn't do anything to persuade Lassie and Jules not to be on the case. And that was out of the question. You know, he's asking about, he's like, oh my gosh, Abigail's fight. But then, of course, Juliet and Abigail are taken. And Sean is hit so hard when that happens. And for the first time, he's left at a loss of what to do. It's probably the closest we ever see Sean giving up on saving someone. And that takes a lot to do. Deep down, he's a very good person, and, you know, he really does care a lot for people. He wants to help people in his own way, of course. And this is one of the first times we truly see him about to give up on saving someone because he doesn't know what to do. Because Yin has got that much in his head that he doesn't know what to do anymore. Because he truly believes that he won't be able to save both Abigail and Juliet. But his determination ultimately outweighs the fear he has, and he is able to, one, determine where Abigail is so that both women can be saved because they now know where both of them are. However, the feeling of having this killer escape, especially when he was right here, I feel like that definitely lurks in the back of Sean's mind after this. You know, throughout all of season 5, even though we're not aware of it, I do believe that Sean is subconsciously affected by Yin's actions, and he's subconsciously affected by Mary's death, which is the perfect way to set up a side character and make them have that lasting effect. The Yin Yang trilogy did a lot of good for the show, most notably challenging our main protagonist, Sean, more than he had ever been before, but it also did so much character growth for some of our side characters. And I know there's a lot I could talk about this, but I know this video is already going to be long. So the main ones I'm going to talk about right now are Juliet, Lasseter, and Gus. There was a lot of change in these characters, a lot of personal growth, a lot of growth between the relationships and these characters, and it's all so interconnected and woven together, very well executed and well written. I'm going to keep saying that throughout the course of this video. But I think the one who experienced the most personal growth and change is Juliet. Mostly because she herself was a target and a victim of Yin personally. And in the first of the trilogy, in An Evening with Mr. Yang, Juliet is more of this supportive, emotional, like the emotional support to the group, and she's there to help in any way she can. Of course, she's investigating. Of course, she's trying just as hard to capture Yang like everybody else is, and she's more, it seems like she's more of the background on that episode, really trying to keep others grounded, really trying to help them out because she understands how stressful it is and can only imagine like what they're going through, so she's there to support them in any way she can. Which is also why when Sean snaps at her and really drags her in that moment in the psych office, you can tell that he instantly regrets it, and you can really see the hurt on Juliet's face as well, because she's done nothing but try to support him, and he knows that, she knows that, but it was something that happened, which is why at the end when she goes up to him, it's that much more impactful. The moment at the end of season 3 is where the first fruition of Sean and Juliet's relationship really kind of come to light. You know, Juliet comes to Sean afterwards and really wants to talk to him, even though he's on a date with Abigail. And for the first time, she really voices her feelings and stumbles through it, gets it all out and out into the open. And, you know, she talks about, like, the complication of her feelings, but she also praises Sean for being able to operate as well as he did under the stress of not only being called out by a killer, but having his mom being hostage. And she offers to take him out to dinner on a proper date. And of course it doesn't end well because Sean's already on a date with Abigail. But even then, Juliet is ever the supportive person and says, she's like, go get her. She's not going to wait forever. But in Mystery Inn Presents, Juliet very much is in the forefront, especially when she is kidnapped from the bar and is held hostage by Yin. She's targeted because of her relationship with Sean, which had continued to grow from season 3 to the continuation through season 4, and it had been blossoming ever so subtly since their little moment in there. Even though it ended badly, it was still progressing very well. Yin must have took notice of that and used her as a pawn for his game. We see her at the top of the clock tower, and she's tied to a chair, basically hanging off of the clock tower, knowing that whenever the clock hits a certain number, that rope is going to be snapped and she's going to fall. I can only imagine the amount of panic and fear that she had, especially hearing every minute that ticked by, knowing that's 1 minute closer to her death, essentially. And it's so sad because you can see that panic and fear, but you can also see there's a moment where it's on her face and you just tell she just gives up for a moment, and it's so sad to see because she really thinks she's gonna die and nobody's gonna save her. And after being saved by Lassie and Gus, she even tries to deny being like shaken up, and she tries to insist that she's fine. And Lassie, which we're about to talk about him, Lassie is the one to really take her in and be like, it's okay to not be fine. And he talks to her, and that's when she just completely breaks down and cries. Subsequently, Juliet is left with a lot of trauma and PTSD, which who wouldn't be? She takes time off from her job to recuperate. Obviously, she comes back to the force because it's her job and she recovers from it, but she's definitely marred by what had happened to her, and that comes into play at the end of the 5th season with Yang 3 and 2D, when we meet Allison, who is claiming to be a victim of Yin as well. Ultimately, she's able to overcome that trauma and help put an end to Yin's reign, but she is still left by a lot of mental scars by that killer because of what he's done. Now Lasseter, Lasseter is another character who experiences a whole lot of growth, although a lot of it, his is a lot more subtle, especially more subtle than Juliet's. But even though Lasseter seems like his usual like gung-ho, I'm gonna catch the killer, pew 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 type of person, Lassie cares a whole lot more than he likes to let on. And even though, you know, he and Sean especially they almost never see eye to eye, they're always arguing at times. Besides all of that, there's a level of respect and care that Lasseter has for Sean. It first comes out whenever, you know, Sean's mom is taken in the end of season 3. You know, Lassie understands instantly the seriousness of the situation. A lot of the time, Lassie is not known for his decorum, and he often says too much or, you know, really hammers it in that the situation's not good, but he doesn't do that in this case. He's really able to read the situation well and understand that this is not something that he really needs to be talking about too much, and he does just that. And he actually really listens to Sean's nonverbal cues really well in this episode. When Sean is in the car with Yang, and, you know, Yang's talking about blowing up his mom, and Sean just kind of, you know, like, gives a very subtle signal of, like, don't come, you know, or it's like this. He just, you know, it's that one signal, that one nonverbal cue, and Lassie immediately calls everybody off and tells the SWAT team to stand down. It doesn't seem like much, but Lasseter understands the situation so well that he knows that he can't do anything to put Sean's mom in a position that he could get her killed. You know, he's not gonna risk that, not just out of respect for Sean's mom, who he has a connection to, but out of respect for Sean, the situation, and he himself as Lassie never wants to endanger a civilian. So all these factors are coming into play, but it's ultimately kind of that respect for Sean, I believe, that really helps him be like, no, we're not going to go without his okay. And then at the end of the episode, Lassie is talking to Buzz about feeling indifferent and just like a good sense of justice about catching Yang and all of that. But there's this moment where he's alone and he kind of stops and he lets out this big breath, and you can tell that he's a lot more effective than what he lets on, but he doesn't want other people to know. And he kind of like shakes his head and has this moment to himself before he carries on like the soldier he is. And that one moment that we get is really so telling, is that he's so much more affected by things than what he lets on and what he tells people he is. But it did get to him. But the biggest change in Lassie we see is in Mystery and Prison. Sorry, I got really excited. When Juliet is taken, Lassie's normal demeanor and composure goes out the window, and his regard for the rules and regulations also goes out the window, because Lassie, again, he's a stickler for the rules, he's a stickler for the laws and regulations, but when it comes to his partner being taken, it doesn't matter to him. And he even tells the chief, he says, "You have other units, chief. I'll be going to get my partner now." I love Lassie. Lasseter's care for Juliet is and his love for her, which they have such like a big brother little sister relationship that I absolutely adore in this show. And it truly shines in this moment, because at that time he can't think of anything other than wanting to save his partner, wanting to save Juliet and get there and be there for her. He rushes to Juliet with Gus in tow, finds her, literally she's about to fall to her death. Another thing to note, Lassie is a trigger happy fellow, which was the pew 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 from earlier. But you know, he's trigger happy fellow, but instead when he's going to save Juliet, when he goes to the clock tower mechanism, you know, he pulls out his gun and he goes to shoot it, but he stops and he thinks, and you can tell in that one moment he's like, no, this isn't gonna work, and he shoves the gun between the gears and shuts down the clock tower. Because of that control that he has, not just over his emotions but his actions, he's able to save Jules. When he does comfort Juliet and he's telling, you know, he's being there for her, and he's telling her that it's okay not to be okay, you know, she doesn't have to be okay. And when she finally breaks down and cries and he holds her and he says, it's going to be okay, like almost like I'm here, it's gonna be okay, I'm here. I think that moment almost makes me tear up every single time I watch it. It's so sad but so sweet at the same time, because the bond that these two have for one another, it's so sincere and just so pure. And it bleeds over into season 5's final confrontation, when Juliet is also in the house and they've lost contact with her, and you can tell that same panic kind of goes over Lassie's face, and he's like, oh my gosh, again? This can't happen again. So Lassie definitely has some great moments in this trilogy. And Gus, give it up for Gus. Gus also has a lot of great moments in this trilogy. You know, he's always been Sean's right-hand man, and it's easy to see why the two are best friends. They complement each other so well. You know, he really gives Sean his unconditional love and support no matter what. It's really amazing to see, you know, like the two's relationship with one another. It's so great to see. Like, that's such a healthy friendship. At the beginning of Yang's episode, Gus, rightly so, is questioning why Sean isn't taking this serious and why he's trying to make jokes. But once he realizes that Sean is only doing that to try to, you know, keep the fear away and keep himself grounded so he can focus, you know, Gus instantly changes gears. He flips it on a dime. Gus does something not everybody would do, is that when he flips the gears, of course it's played off as comedy and like all these silly antics and whatnot, but it, like, you know, it's the comedy needed in an episode, like a darker episode like that. But his wild antics kind of keep Sean from completely giving in or giving up. It keeps Sean rooted and grounded and focused on what he's supposed to be doing and how he can kind of cope with it as well. Naturally, Juliet and Lasseter don't really understand what's going on. They're like, what is wrong with you, Guster? As Lassie would say. Sean deeply appreciates that support from Gus and just the way that he's willing to make himself look a fool to keep Sean grounded. And Gus knows just when to do it and just when not to do it, because as soon as Sean's mom is taken, Gus automatically knows that none of those antics would be good, none of those antics would work, and he completely flips the switch again and is there for Sean and is supporting him, trying to track down the killer as fast as they can so he can save his mom. And even after Yang is captured and, you know, Sean realizes that Yang has always kind of been there lurking in the background, Gus provides Sean with like a logical truth and support that is much needed by saying, you know, like, we got him. Like, we got her. You know, don't worry about it now. We got her. In a silly way, even when Gus interrupts Sean and Abigail's date at the end of season 3, it's something that's much appreciated by Sean. You can tell, like, the subtle nod he gives to Gus, and Gus is like, I got you. Not any friend would do that for somebody. Like, it really takes a special sort of person to do what Gus did in that episode, and not just in that episode, but also in the other episodes, because not many would do as much for a friend as Gus does for Sean. And it really shows, especially in Mr. Yin Presents, because once again, Gus always is supporting Sean in every way he possibly can. You know, he helps give Sean ideas, like with the movies. He keeps Sean grounded. This time, it's a much different type of support than what we got in the first time. It's not all the silly antics, because again, the tone of this episode is so much darker than even the Yang episode that we got. You know, when Yin kills Mary, he helps Sean really kind of recover and recuperate through that. You know, he spots Yin through the window. He's like, no, the real one's over there. Like, he's right there. I saw him. He's there to support Sean, even when they were wrong about Mary. And then when Jules is taken, Gus is the first that tries to go get her. And Gus, knowing his best friend, he tries to comfort Sean back at the station. But again, Gus knows his best friend so well. He knows his nonverbal cues, and as soon as Gus realizes that nothing he could say or do will help Sean, he just kind of passes him on the back and he leaves him be. He gives him the space that he desperately needed at the time to be able to process everything. Some people wouldn't be able to pick up on those subtleties as much as Gus does, but that just goes to show how well in tune he is, not only with Sean, but just like the way Sean acts. And when it's revealed that Abigail is taken and Sean has to make the choice to save Juliet before he realizes about Abigail, it's Gus who's right there asking him if he's okay, if there's anything he can do. You know, he's the first to be there for Sean. But once Sean determines where Abigail is and he's gonna go get Abigail, and Gus offers to go with him, because of course Gus would offer to go with him, but Sean says no. You know, he needed to go with Lasseter to get Jules, because he says the only way I can't be there is if I know you are, or something along those lines, because that is they have ultimate trust in each other. Sean has this ultimate trust for Gus that the only way he can't be there is if Gus is. It just speaks volumes to, one, how much they mean to each other, how much they trust each other, but also knowing, like, Gus is someone who is going to save Juliet. Like, that is what Sean believes down in his core. And Gus, after he makes sure Sean isn't going alone, he makes sure Sean's bringing someone with him, then he goes to save Juliet with Lassie. And not just because it's Jules and he's friends with her and he wants to save her, but it's also because he knows how much Juliet means to his best friend. There's so many layers in play when they're going to save Juliet. Gus is able to pull off this ridiculous feat of holding back the clock tower hand, the clock tower hand, while Lassie's trying to find a way to stop it, which I'm sure his adrenaline was going like crazy. But for him to be able to hold it back as long as he did just to save Juliet, that's so impressive of him. Like, I don't think it's talked about enough, in my opinion. That was a really good moment for Gus. And then he calls Sean and he lets him know that they got Juliet, that Juliet's safe. And again, Gus provides this logical truth and support to Sean when he desperately needs it, when he's like, oh, I let him get away. He was right in front of me. Yin was right in front of me. I could have touched him. But Gus reassures Sean. He's like, no, you had to do it. You had to let him go. You had to save Abigail. It's that moment, that logical moment that Sean desperately needed at that time, because he was still, you know, Sean's adrenaline was probably pumping still, and that fear that he made the wrong choice was probably looming in his mind because of how much Yin had got to him in this episode. But then Gus really quells that fear. Gus is quite literally Sean's voice of reason in the most crucial moments of Sean's breaking point, and that in itself speaks volumes of not only his character but the friendship that those two have. Just the camaraderie and the absolute trust in these two characters just really shine, not just in this trilogy, and especially in the last part of this trilogy where they're together, chained up, but just throughout the entire series as a whole. It really shines in the last of the trilogy, which we're getting to right now with Yang 3 and 2D. It's the last installment of the trilogy, and it wraps up pretty much everything from the first two, and it gives so much payoff from everything, like the wonderful character development, the setup, everything that the first two did. It wrapped up very well, and it was a really good payoff. And so this girl Allison shows up claiming to be captured, like she's claiming to be a victim of Yin, that she was kidnapped by him. And of course Sean and Gus are very hesitant to believe her because they say they get these claims all the time, which is kind of sick. But they go talk to her, and Juliet's in behind the glass listening with Lasseter, and you can tell it's very hard for her to even listen to this conversation. So she asks if she can leave, and Lasseter, ever so caring for his partner in his own ways, he's like, yeah. He's like, no, you don't have to stay here. And so she goes, and he stays in to listen. But Allison shows proof that Yin had taken her, not just from showing the layout, but also this picture of Sean as a kid with Yang, which completely baffles Sean, because he's like, why am I in a picture with this woman? Like, what? He has no memory of this. But once that picture is authenticated, he realizes, like, yeah, he really was with Yang in this picture. So he's trying to get this sorted out and figure out where this photo came from. But he also, once he realizes that this thing with Allison is real, he leaves her in the care of his dad, which shows how much Sean trusts his father. And then Allison is taken from Henry's house with the yin yang symbol left in her stead. Sean then again goes to the source of everything, where they've gotten the most help and information. They go straight to Yang. And Yang, you know, asks about the picture, and Sean's like, why do I have no memory of this? Of course, Yang is offended, and he's like, I don't know where this came from. And then Yang ends up being taken to Henry's house, and, you know, kind of gives them as much help as she is willing to give them, because she has her own plan in mind, I'll guarantee it. Gives them just enough to pin down that Yin is actually a professor, most specifically a college professor. After the chase through the university, the discovery of, like, the truth of the photo, and Mary's videotapes, which is a fantastic way to include this very good side character in the last installment after he's been killed off. It was such a clever way to do that. It was really good, because again, it reinvigorated that impact that his death had on Sean. After all of this, Sean and Gus frantically head out to where it all began in order to try to end it and save Allison. But when they get there, the whole thing's a trap, and Allison is now the new accomplice and is Yin's apprentice. The entire thing is a setup, and the two are taken by Allison up to where Yin is and are strapped down to chairs with zip ties. Zip ties. You know, once they're strapped down, she's dismissed by Yin, and then all the police get there as Allison's inside guarding the house with a shotgun. And it gets to complete chaos when everybody realizes that the house has been barred off and is basically impossible to get in through normal means, which leads to them calling for the battering ram, for the SWAT team, and all of this. And, you know, Juliet is the one who brings Yang in because it is the only thing that Yin couldn't expect them to do. Of course, Lasseter isn't okay with, because he's worried about Juliet, but they do it anyways. And as Juliet and Yang head into the house, we get this masterful reveal of Yin, who is all about class and, you know, presentation, who clarifies that he's not obsessed with Sean, because Yang was obsessed with him. Yang betrayed Yin to save Sean's mom, and that's what made Yin angry, and he blames Sean for having Yang betray his trust and break his heart. Poor thing. So to get his revenge, he's going to first kill Gus and then kill Sean, which is actually a true form of torture for Sean. But Yang downstairs knows Juliet's relationship with Sean. Somehow she's able to piece it together, but she also informs Juliet that she is Sean's only chance of surviving, which she actually turns out to be right about. Oddly enough. She leaves Juliet and makes her way up to the top to confront Yin. Juliet ends up finding Allison, and she's quick to deduce that Allison is actually in on it and she's not as innocent as she's playing to be, which the two end up having this massive fight, which is actually fantastic. Like, that fight scene is so cool to watch, and Juliet just destroys her. It's so nice to watch. It results in Juliet's victory. She beats Allison down and is basically like, no, you're done. Sit down. Back up to Yin. Sean managed to distract Yin long enough to not kill, you know, him or Gus, until Yang comes in, dropping a massive plot twist with two simple words. Just, hi, Daddy. I remember being so shocked and not quite sure. I was like, I didn't hear that right. I must have heard her wrong. She did not just say, hi, Daddy. But then the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I was like, oh my gosh, that's why Yin was so upset at Sean for Yang betraying him, because she betrayed her father, you know, like, he was like, how could you choose this boy over me, your own dad? The more I remember being so shocked when this first came out, I was like, oh my gosh, they're related, oh my gosh. Because I wasn't expecting it. I don't think anybody was expecting it. You know, Sean and Gus are just as shocked. Again, Yang surprises everyone when she turns on her father yet again, stabbing him in the chest with the poison needle that he had concocted specifically for Gus, and ends up killing him. And the entire dynamic of their relationship is very well summed up. And just the ending lines, like the last conversation those two have, is when he says, I never loved you. And she's just like, I know. Yang ended up being just as much a victim of Yin as anybody else. And it seems she had planned from the start to kind of get her revenge on her father and really end what he had going, which is why she didn't kill Sean's mom, because she said, we'll be working together soon. Kind of signaling that, hey, I have this plan that we're going to get back at my dad for everything he's done, and you're the one who's going to do it. And it's also why, you know, she told Sean that she needed him to like her, because she knew if they had a chance of taking down Yin, they needed to be working together in some form or capacity. The fact that Yang had the feeling that Sean would be the one to take Yin down, so she set Sean up for success, was really, really cool. And it shows that while, you know, she's a little crazy, she's also incredibly smart as well, much more so than people often gave her credit for. It ends with Allison, you know, being taken by police, probably being put in prison, you know, Yang getting her extra picture with Sean, and then the end scene of Sean kind of being there for Juliet as she's trying to write her statement. She's really struggling with it. Of course, the big reveal is that they're dating, that Lasseter finds out, because he's back behind in the window watching. That's the big reveal at the end of the season. But to know that Lasseter was behind the glass watching over Juliet just in case she needed someone, just in case she needed someone to be there for her, and he was watching out for her, speaks again so much towards his character and how much he cares about Juliet. The complicated feelings this trilogy in particular brings out in all the characters of the show is something that is so well done, and it's done very brilliantly. Like, I don't think it could have been done a different way and had that much of an impact as it did. But I don't think I've covered everything about this trilogy. I think that would be a very, very long video if I tried. I know this is already a very long video. But I think it's a good summation. I hope. I think it's a good summation of everything the trilogy got right. The excellent work it did within the scopes of the show and like what it brought to the show, how it changed the show, everything like that. It brought a lot of character development. It brought unnerving situations for sure, memorable side characters, and the fruition of a lot of the relationships with the characters. For Sean and Gus, it really just solidified their trust with each other, and it strengthened their already like incredibly strong relationship and friendship. For Sean and Lassie, it continued to establish this mutual trust and respect for each other as they really began to lean on one another for help and just really to help each other out. For Sean and Jules, oh my gosh, it shows the incredible progress of the relationship from the upsetting rejection at the end of season 3 to like this complicated feeling of terror and like time making him stop to think like, well, is she really my priority? Is she really who do I choose? You know, to season 5 being like the fruition of they're actually in a relationship, trusting each other and trying to protect each other. Like, it's such a cool progression to see throughout these, especially in this trilogy. For Sean and Henry too, I know I didn't get to talk about Henry a lot in this video. Their father-son relationship really shone of how much Sean really trusted and depended on Henry throughout most of this trilogy and how they really trusted each other. And I think in a way it really helped them mend their broken relationship a lot more than, you know, because they had been working on it a little bit, but I think these three especially really helped mend that broken relationship a lot. You can tell that, especially like it started to get so much healthier, especially starting in season 4, season 5. You could really tell the difference. For Lasseter and Jules, their friendship, I love their friendship so much. It really shines a light on this friendship that they have and this brother-sister dynamic that they have. This love that they have for one another, it grows, and it's really spotlighted to say that they will go to incredible lengths to save each other because they just care that much about each other. The storytelling in this trilogy by itself is incredible, but it's the layers and the depths that it adds not only to the characters but to the relationships and then the show in general. It really created an extra layer of meaningfulness in the show with all like the goofiness. It created a really specific avenue for this show to explore with the characters and just these ideas of our characters really being in danger and having to come out of what, you know, people expect from them, things of that nature, what they normally act like, being exposed raw down to the core, everything like that. It really gets to explore the more serious sides of these characters and provide really great relationships interacting and great foils for characters to work with and work against. I could really talk all day about Psych, which is a really bad thing. I'm sure y'all have noticed the lighting changes. It's starting to get dark outside. This show is so good. It is my favorite TV show out there. And I cannot wait for the newest movie to come out. I know it's coming out soon. Psych 3. So I'm really excited for it. I do really hope you've enjoyed this kind of analysis and digging into Psych, especially this trilogy. If you like this video, make sure you like it, comment down below, share it to a fellow psycho or a friend you want to watch the show or something like that if you want. If you agree with what I've said, make sure you let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on this trilogy. If you disagree with me, let me know down in the comments. Just be nice about it. We can have a nice conversation, respectful conversation. I don't mind that at all. But yeah, make sure you follow me on all my socials. They're down in the descriptions below so we can stay connected throughout the weeks, as I continue to update, you'll be able to see what I'm doing on my social media, mostly TikTok because I'm mostly active over there right now, so you'll be able to see what I'm doing over there. If you want more Psych in the future, make sure you comment down below if there's something specific you would like to see me analyze or cover. Leave me suggestions down below. I would be happy to take them. But I'm gonna go eat because I haven't eaten all day. And I have food right there. So I'm gonna go enjoy my food. I really hope you've enjoyed this analysis again. And other than that, I will see you next time, scholars. Bye!